This is an all-star panel. Actually, we're starting. So hi, I'm Kevin. I'm back. This is an all-star panel, and I'll tell you about them in a second. I just wanted to start there have been so many sort of whipsawing changes of the last few years for people who care about people who are in talent roles, especially, and a lot of the changes are actually very fundamental. I think about Nick Bloom has a chart about remote work, and he showed that through the pandemic, e-commerce sort of went way off the curve because everyone's buying stuff online. It's actually now back on the same curve it was before. But then when you look at whether people actually work from home or whether people are actually going to offices, it left the curve and it is continuing actually on a pretty altered trajectory. And that's true across a lot of dimensions of the things that we're dealing with. And so what we want to do with this group of amazing women is to try and step back from the things that have been kind of whipsawing us. Is the labor market tight? Are we all working from home? Are we going to offices? How are we talking about societal issues within our companies? What does AI mean for all of our jobs, let alone all of our colleagues and relatives and everybody? And so we're going to, hopefully by the end of this, try and have this step back perspective that helps everyone kind of go forth and with a bit more clarity and confidence in kind of staying the course on some of these things. So this is an incredible honor for me to have this panel. I have in the middle, we have Cara Allamano. She's Chief People Officer at Lattice. She's co-founder of People Tech Partners. She was previously SVP of People at Udemy and Planet Labs. Edith Cooper, who's right next to me, is a longtime friend of Charters also. She's a co-founder of Medley with her daughter Jordan, who's also here. Edith is a board member at Amazon and PepsiCo, and is a former EVP at Goldman Sachs, where she was global head of human capital management. And then Jelena Djordjevic is at the end. She's vice president of people at Thumbtack, and she's formerly from Bain and Airbnb. So thank you for this. We're going to try in the time we have to sort out all the issues that everyone is facing. And
in 17 minutes and 34 seconds.
If anyone can do it, I have confidence that you can. Jelena, I want to start with you, just to as part of the step back, what are the three things of the last few years that you think are most fundamental and lasting and should be on our radar going forward?
Yeah, I think for me, I think we've talked about it a lot today, but I think future of work and really at its core, how we work and where we work. And it's not necessarily the specific change, is it virtual or hybrid? It's just the fact that we are fundamentally questioning all of that and that we have opened up the set of possibilities is a massive change. Yeah. I think the economic cycles and the cycles of change, the pace of that and the magnitude of that has changed, whereas previously you might have expected a recession every 10 to 12 years. Here it's just these unpredictable swings that will cause things. And I think related to that, what we've seen is that the power dynamics have fundamentally changed, and that the implications of economic change having real people dynamic changes. So the power dynamic between an employee and an employer, or generational power dynamics, where some of you are probably at the Gen Z working at the session there, there's a big power imbalance right now, and people are trying to figure out who controls what and who's gonna get what out of fixed pots of resources. And so I think these are some of the big changes that are really undercurrents to a lot of the very specific decisions that we're facing of what do we do with pay transparency, or what do we do in the talent market?
And so where and when we work, the speed of change and the power dynamics are on your top list. Cara, do you add any plus one in those, or add anything?
I would add sort of the sources of these impacts, which is a global pandemic, social justice issues, war.
Yeah.
A year and a half ago, when I was at Udemy, we had just taken the company public. And it was February, and the night before I went to bed, I was like, everything's great, this is super, we're on such a great track. The next day, unfortunately, the Ukraine-Russia war started. Yeah. And we called together our executive team, and the first question around the table, I had literally 8 faces looking at me, and they said, okay, Cara, what are we gonna do? And what was fascinating to me in that moment was, first of all, the shock and awe of what happened in Russia and Ukraine. Yeah. Second of all, literally for that moment in my life, I was sitting around the table, and the first question that came after the shock and awe of war and the concerns we had about our employees that may have been close to those was the realization that me as a people leader, I was the first person with a potential answer. And what also, upon reflection there, that I think about is that was an order of operations that had happened one right after another for the prior 18 months, right? The pandemic, social justice. And man, when I started in HR, I didn't expect that, right? Yeah. I didn't expect that the core of my being would be someone who's dealing with these existential social threats, as well as trying to build an internal community and get to outcomes from a business standpoint.
And you're having to have an answer about something that's fundamentally geopolitical risk or situation. Edith, yeah.
Yeah, and the thing that I'd want to add to that terrific list is that you have to care.
Yes.
And you have to have a point of view, not just to things that you believe are relevant to your company and to your clients and to your people. You have to care about so many things that you might have historically been able to say, not our issue, right? And so this blending expectation of humans being human and having the space to be human in organizations is something that is a step change evolution of what it means to be a company that is relevant and to be a leader whose relevance is going to matter over time. And that is not always straightforward. A lot of gray.
How do you, so you've identified some of the sort of fundamental shifts, and then maybe we can move now to, like, what is the long view, among the issues that we have on the table here, employer-employee relationship, what is the long view of that, the nature of jobs with AI coming? What is the long view of that? I know these are like hard to give simple answers to. Edith is raising her eyebrows at me.
I'm not a good poker player.
What kind of questions? But tell me your honest reaction to that.
I mean, my honest reaction to it is, what? Because those are all really, really big questions.
Yeah.
And my reaction to it, yes and.
Yeah.
Yes, those are all things that we're going to have to think about, evaluate in the here and now, have a plan for the now, but the only way you can continue to flex within the organization is to have a framework that you can apply to different circumstances that allow you to flex. Not something that's rigid, that's going to be the same forever, but a methodology. I think you were talking about that earlier, that you were more prepared, however devastating it was in the war between the Ukraine and Russia, because there had been things that had occurred. So I think it's super critically important to prepare and be intentional about how you're positioning your organization through its most important level, its people, to flex these things, not just to survive them, but to really evolve with them to capture and create the next level of opportunities.
Yeah. Jelena, you brought up the question of employee-employer power. How, stepping back from that, we've seen, I don't even need to repeat the Great Resignation and whatever else we've seen, and tight labor market and loosening a bit, and employee expectations and employer frustration. We're stepping back from that. Where are we at and where are we going?
Yeah, where my head goes is probably, I'm not quite sure what my crystal ball has to say about the future, but I feel like it's more what are the principles that matter when you're facing this kind of change?
Principle, very good point.
And so say if you take this whole RTO, the return to the office over the last 6 months, as opposed to the crazy opening of the market and mobility 2 years ago, I think the reason we are seeing that, I think that is sort of a kind of a symptom of two things. I think one, that companies were very reactive and not reasoning from first principles to the labor market. So 2 years ago, a lot of companies said, of course we embrace virtual work, but it's because they wanted to go hire engineers anywhere they could. It wasn't because they truly believed that was the right answer. And so I think when you're facing these crazy changes, what's really important is to define what's sacred for you, like what will always be true. So for us at Thumbtack, our values come up every single day. Like we are always optimizing for our values. Then it's reasoning for first principles, like what are you actually solving for? And so if you went virtual because you were solving for hiring talent anywhere, then if all of a sudden the labor market changes, you don't have to go do that anymore. So you will easily 180 versus if you're doing that to offer flexibility, a more inclusive work environment for more diverse people, employees, you will probably, those are everlasting principles. And then I think the last thing that's really important to remember amidst all this crazy change is what goes up must comes down. Like except for, like when you mentioned Nick Bloom, right? Like generally things will normalize. And I think that's what we're seeing now, that we were actually living in some ways in a very different reality the last couple of years, and there's a bit of a normalization. And so I think figuring out what's sacred, what you're solving for, and remembering that like you want to stay the course to what matters most to you and your organization, and that is how you chart forward, not by being super reactive to changing tides.
Do you want to add anything to that, Cara? I mean, one of the kind of meta questions here is how do you avoid being whipsawed by the economy? And actually, interestingly, in the tech sector, we saw like a lot of layoffs in the beginning of the year, and then we saw the same companies hiring, and that feels like those companies are rewarded actually by the stock market and other constituencies for doing that. How do you, Cara? What's your take on how to avoid being whipsawed?
I think some of it is not avoidable. So I think at Lattice we have a value called clear eyes, and that's along the lines of the first principle, which is you have to have some component of the way you do business, which is really about honesty. And as an extension of honesty, I think that's an exception, the accepting of risk, and also accepting of the fallibility of humans and the decisions we're going to make. I think there was a lot of we had 7 or 8 years of strong confidence, and confidence feels amazing, and it feels like you're right all the time because you can make a decision A, B, or C, and it all turns out great. So everybody's a genius, myself included, right? I found myself talking to my team 2 weeks ago, and I was sharing with both these ladies. Because I had a number of folks on my team that have only seen up and to the right, and that's really hard, right? And I said I sound like an old lady, but I was like back in my day, But there's
this thing called inflation,
right? There's a beauty to accepting the truth, which is that you're going to make some good decisions, you're going to make some not good decisions, and there's also a beauty to understanding the things that are. The things that are good about running a business, that are good about being a manager, that are good about being an employee are perennial. And we mentioned that too. Being able to be a trustworthy leader, to be able to be honest and upfront, to care about data, to care about people, and to really optimize for the outcomes of your business so that you can give yourself more freedom and opportunity in the future are the things that, if you anchor on those, you tend to turn out okay. And I don't think it's a mistake that you've seen some of these memes or people have reported on the strongest businesses in the world have been built in downturns. And a lot of that is because you have to realize what your conviction is, and it's often the companies that have been through the fire that have had to go to first principles and learn what conviction looks like in a bad situation really rise to the occasion in the future. So I'm optimistic.
It's Warren Buffett who said, find out who's naked when the tide goes out. Edith, one of the changes over the last few years that we felt is expectations of employees around their employers speaking out on societal and political issues. This is super complicated. We're seeing it right now with the conflict in the Middle East. It's hard to imagine that next year's U.S. elections won't trigger some similar workplace dynamics and so forth. Stepping back, taking the long view, what's your advice on how to navigate those employee expectations and get these situations more right than wrong?
Yeah, I think that the first challenge is that that the question of right versus wrong is hotly debated, not just hotly, but deeply personally felt perspectives. And in the world where organizations have done work to have people in their organizations who are coming at it from different perspectives, in an environment which is, I would say, continues to be fraught with challenges, you know, how do you get it right for everyone all of the time?
Yeah.
And, you know, I think for me personally, as a leader and as a human, I err towards a strong lens of empathy and understanding and recognizing that there are complexities and having guiding principles associated with that. I was talking to one of my former colleagues who I've known for a very long time. We worked together for a long time. And I asked her judgment, like, you know, how do you think about it? Because I continue to search and learn, and I think that that's very, very important. I think one of the things that we should take as a given that there will continue to be expectations from employees, from your customers, and from society at large for leaders to have to be able to say something. And so I would strongly hope and suggest that one of the definitions of leadership is to be prepared. And, you know, I just quickly, years ago, I think when Eric Garner was killed in Brooklyn, there was an uproar within Goldman Sachs around talking about race. Can you imagine now that was like a novel thing? And a discussion on whether the CEO at the time or the COO could make a statement. And I think there were only 2 or 3 CEOs at the time who said something. Fast forward to now. Fast forward to 2020, right? And so these expectations are going to continue to grow, and we have to do the work as individuals in our roles as leaders to attempt to speak in a way that everyone hears and that resonates, and that takes intentionality.
And in the specifics, it's obviously hard to figure that out in the moment a lot of the time. Yeah.
And that is the expectation.
And that is the expectation.
And that is the expectation.
We just have a little bit of time, and this may be part of it, what you just were saying, but one of the questions, you know, having you here, I'm interested in how the role that you have served or are serving in people leadership, CHRO, Chief People Officer, in these different roles. How is that settling out after these? And I guess part of the question is it more connected to business results, and what is the relationship there? And Jelena, maybe you start.
Yeah. I mean, I think for us, as we think about the people team and through that, the role of the people leader, we say that our purpose is to enable the success of the business through the success of our people, full stop. Like, and so everything does in some ways come down, is this duality between the kind of extreme focus on value creation and for our customers, and doing that through our people. And so for us, I think as we think about how the people function and the people leader role is evolving, is if we are really trying to manage the success of the business through the success of our people, how do we bring the same level of rigor and kind of management to our organization that we do to our financials? So we have all been in OKR reviews, P&L reviews, like the analytics and financial muscles of companies are very well established. How do we take the same care and emphasis and rigor to think about the health of our organization and the health of our employees, such that they can maximize their impact, and they can have that they can create values for our customers? So for us, it's really about bringing that same bar that we do to business performance that we do to organizational health and performance.
Is there a quick example of that?
Yeah, and an example is like for us, what we're rolling out next year is last year we focused a lot about OKRs for business performance, and next year we're having people goals for every single people leader. Like they are going to have a people scorecard. They have org health dashboards. They're held accountable to the outcomes of their organizations, like the people outcomes of the organization.
Like engagement,
retention, attrition, initiative-specific OKRs.
Yeah.
Those type of outcomes are viewed as the means to the end to the business outcomes, and so we have to track both, like how's their product shipping as well as how engaged and retentive is their organization.
Yeah. Cara, for you, how does the people leader role settle out? You know, stepping back of the changes of the last few years.
I love this, and part of it is maybe I'm just a glutton for punishment, but I think these are the moments where, as a people leader, we are called to action, and it's because we do understand that dynamic between the people and the business, and I know that my business has to be successful, and then there are amazing benefits that come to my people. I've lived that.
Yeah.
So to make
And can I just ask?
Yeah.
And can your business be successful if your people are not successful?
No.
Right?
No, and I live that too.
Right? How cool is that? How cool is
right?
that? I'm just repeating what you said, by the way. That was really
It's one
great.
and the same.
Yeah, it's one and the same. So we're a bunch of HR folks and HR adjacent in this room, right? Hey, this is when like careers are made. This is when life-changing decisions are made. This is when we take the reins of where people spend the most of their time, and we change the world, because we're the people, when bad things happen, when great things happen at the table, people are turning to us saying, well, what do we do? Yeah. So it's another version of like the rallying cry, but the point is we do have tools now where we can show up, and we know what to do in terms of being business leaders, because we've had to do that. So I get excited about it. I also get really exhausted, but I think this is the time when we get to show what our profession can bring to the table.
I want to come to Edith in a second, but just one thing that we haven't talked about, and is something that we've been thinking about a lot, is the impact of AI on work. And I'm curious, in your role, and Cara, maybe, is that an active part of work, or how do you?
Huge active part of work. I was talking to Mark Simpson, who is CEO of a company called Pillar. They do interview intelligence. Yeah. And just as a small example, you turn on your Zoom, you're doing your interview, and on the side is the sentiment analysis and the recording and everything you'd ever want to know about that half an hour you spent with that human. Yeah. And then at the end you get a beautiful scorecard, all AI driven, right? Yeah. So we live in a world where that person can focus on that interview, and then we can have a full set of data to make better decisions. Yeah. We think about this a lot at Lattice. I know you think about this a lot as a founder yourself, Edith. I think what it's going to do is let us do our jobs as people leaders in terms of decision making and influencing and partnering, doing the right thing for the success of the individual and the business a lot. It will make that easier. And of course, there's a ton of risk around all of this. Yes, I'm very well versed in that. But I think it will take a lot of the heavy lifting off of us and our team so we can do some of our best work.
So Edith, what does people leadership look like in 2024, and how is it different? And this question of how the stepping back, what is the?
I think people leadership is about leading people in a way that has never been the case before. Yeah. And that's a pretty dramatic statement. Translate people to human beings. And I reflect upon, 5 or 7 years ago where, you were to care and to understand that, that human dynamic is super important to understand, that there's science behind it, that there's research associated with it, that there's data that will show that the human interaction is super powerful when it happens in a certain way and super negative when it doesn't. All of those things are funnels into understanding the human dynamic in a different way. Mm-hmm. When you're around as long as I've been around, you can quote periods where those things were defined as nice things. Mm-hmm. Listening, empathy,
soft skills.
Soft skills. Made me crazy, and now I think the leader of 2024 and beyond is about that, informed by, the realization that successful people, keep going back to what you both have been talking about, are required for organizations to be successful. What a powerful statement! But that is what's going to drive people leadership in 2024 and beyond.
Yeah, great. Thank you. You three are people who I look to for leadership and insight into how to avoid being whipsawed in many ways. So thank you for this time. We have Jelena from Thumbtack, Cara from Lattice, Edith from Medley, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great.
I think we have a minute, and actually Edward Felsenthal from Time is going to come in and launch us into the next session.
Awesome.
Awesome.
And final session.